Nicolette Zane had just dumped her full glass of red wine into her lap, and the man across the table didn't even notice. "I'm not kidding, I made 6 figures last month flipping NFTs," her date droned on, stabbing his fork at a limp steak. "You should really consider investing." "I could show you some charts." Nicolette forced a tight smile, dabbing at her soaked dress with a napkin. Of course her friend had set her up with the most self-absorbed man in Manhattan. She should have known when he showed up with a Bluetooth headset still in his ear. "I think I'm going to call it a night," she said, pushing her chair back, but the man Troy, lifted a hand. Wait, dessert's coming. You can't bail before the creme brulee." That's when she heard the chair scrape beside her. A voice low, deep, firm cut through their awkward energy like a knife. She said, "She's done. I'll walk her out." Nicolette turned, startled. Standing beside her was a man she'd never seen before. Tall, broad-shouldered, dark hair swept back like he belonged in a cologne ad. His eyes, gray, serious, unreadable, locked on hers with a flicker of concern. Troy blinked. "And who the hell are you?" The stranger didn't answer. Instead, he extended his hand toward Nicolette. "Come with me." For a second, she hesitated, but the look in his eyes wasn't aggression. It wasn't pity either. It was something else, like he actually cared she was uncomfortable. She stood. "Yeah, I'm done here." The strange man didn't say a word until they were out of the restaurant, past the velvet ropes, and halfway down the block. "You okay?" he asked finally. Nicolette laughed, breathless. "That was dramatic. I figured you needed a way out." "I did," she said, glancing over at him. "You usually rescue women from terrible dates." "Not usually," he said, hands casually in his coat pockets. "But I know the look of someone trapped." "Thanks," she said softly. He paused. "I'm Quinton Burke, Nicolette Zane." They shook hands, her skin still cold from the air, his warm and strong. "Want to keep walking?" he asked. She looked at her stained dress, then back at him. "Sure." "Why not?" They walked through the city like two strangers who had nothing to lose. She told him about her job as a freelance illustrator, how she'd been ghosted by 3 clients this week and was down to instant ramen and black coffee. He told her he worked in investments, boring stuff, he said, but didn't go into details. He asked more questions than he answered. She liked that. They ended up at a little hole-in-the-wall bakery where he ordered her a slice of lemon cake and himself a black coffee. "I'm sorry again for just jumping in back there," he said, sliding the plate toward her. "Don't be. You saved me." He gave her a small look, almost like a smile, but quieter. "You didn't look like you needed saving." She paused, fork halfway to her mouth. "What makes you say that? You walked out on your own," he said simply. "I just gave you a better exit." Her chest tightened. She didn't even know this man, but something about him felt safe. "Do you do this often?" she asked. "Buy dessert for strange women in ruined dresses," he leaned forward. "Only the ones who say creme brulee like it's a threat." She laughed, louder than she meant to. They stayed there until the bakery closed. When they stepped outside, the city had quieted. She didn't want the night to end, but didn't know how to say it. Quinton looked at her like he was thinking the same thing. "Do you need a ride?" "I'm a subway girl," she said, lifting her brows. He nodded. "Fair, but it's late." "Let me at least walk you to the station." They walked in silence, but it wasn't awkward. It was nice. At the entrance to the station, she turned to him. "Thanks again for everything," he nodded. "I'm glad I was there." She paused. "We're not going to do that thing where we never see each other again, are we?" He surprised her. He looked almost relieved. "No," he said. "We're not." She pulled a card from her coat pocket. "My info." He took it carefully, like it meant something. "I'll call," he said, and he did. The next morning, he asked her to dinner. "Somewhere nice," he said. She said yes. What he didn't tell her was that somewhere nice turned out to be a rooftop restaurant in Soho, complete with a candlelit table, a view of the skyline, and a string quartet playing live. She stepped out of the car he sent for her, yes, a car, and stared up at the building. When she walked onto the rooftop and saw him waiting in a sleek black suit, her heart nearly stopped. "You didn't say it would be this kind of nice," she said, breathless. "I wanted to do it right. Quinton, this place has a dress code. You look perfect." She did. He'd sent a box to her apartment that afternoon with a note, "Wear this tonight." Inside was a deep navy dress, elegant but simple, that fit her like it was made for her. She sat down, still in shock. You're full of surprises. I like surprising you, she tilted her head. So what exactly do you do again? I run a firm, investments, real estate, tech acquisitions. Her eyes narrowed. You're not just some guy who helps strangers escape bad dates, are you? He smiled. No. I'm not. How successful are we talking? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he poured her a glass of wine and said, I bought this restaurant last year. She nearly choked. Excuse me? I'm a millionaire, Nicolette. She stared at him, stunned. And you still walked a girl to the subway. I didn't want to scare you off. You think money would scare me off. I think you're not like most people. She stared at him across the candlelight. You're right, I'm not. The music swelled behind them. The skyline glittered around them. And for the first time in a long time, Nicolette wasn't thinking about the rent she owed, or the commissions she hadn't booked, or the bad dates she'd suffered. She was thinking about this man who appeared out of nowhere and made her feel like she was the only woman in New York. And she couldn't wait to see him again. Nicolette hadn't expected to see a Rolls-Royce waiting outside her building at noon on a Tuesday, its glossy black body gleaming like a mirror under the pale sun. She stood on the sidewalk holding a steaming coffee cup and a sketch pad, blinking at the suited driver who stepped out and opened the door without a word. Inside, Quinton was waiting. She slid in beside him, stunned silent for a moment as the door shut and the world outside disappeared behind tinted glass. You're kidnapping me, she asked, half laughing, half incredulous. His mouth twitched. If I were, I'd have brought snacks. This is just an interlude. To where? You'll see. She leaned back against the seat as the car pulled away from the curb, heart thudding with something that wasn't fear. She'd expected a coffee date, maybe a museum walk. Not leather interiors, a built-in champagne bar, and a man who looked like he belonged on the cover of Forbes. Outside, the city blurred past. Inside, his gaze was steady. You're quiet, he said. I'm trying to figure you out. How's it going? Badly. You're a man who doesn't flinch at luxury but also insists on walking someone to the subway. I like contradictions. She turned her head slightly. You're full of them. They drove for a while, and when the car finally stopped, she stepped out into a private courtyard filled with glass sculptures and trimmed hedges. A modern building rose behind it, understated but clearly expensive, like it had been designed to impress without shouting. Quinton led her through a discreet side entrance, past a receptionist who greeted him by name, and into an elevator that opened directly into a penthouse. Nicolette froze. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the skyline like a living painting. Artwork lined the walls, originals, not prints. Sunlight spilled across marble floors, and in the center of it all, a sleek grand piano stood like a sculpture. You live here? She asked, awed. When I'm in the city, she spun slowly, drinking in the space. This is insane. Sit down, he said, gesturing to the terrace beyond the glass doors. I had lunch brought up. Outside, a table was set beneath a canopy, surrounded by ivy-covered trellises and a view that stretched all the way to the Hudson. A breeze lifted her hair as she stepped out, and she caught the scent of roasted garlic and lemon. Are you always this dramatic? Only when I want to impress someone. And are you trying to impress me? Obviously, she laughed, but something heavy stirred in her chest, not dread, something warmer, something cautious. He served her a plate himself, grilled fish, charred vegetables, a couscous salad with golden raisins and almonds. Tell me something you don't usually tell people, he said, pouring sparkling water into their glasses. She tapped her fork against the rim of her plate. My landlord thinks I have a steady job, he raised a brow. I told her I was an art director at an agency. I didn't want her to get nervous about rent. Are you behind? Not yet. But I've been drawing commissions for pet portraits and book covers for indie authors. It's unpredictable. Some months are fine, others not. He didn't offer pity, just nodded. That's brave. I don't feel brave. I feel like I'm one bad review away from moving back in with my mother. What would you do if money wasn't an issue? Open a studio, a real one, with space and light. And I'd start the graphic novel I've been sketching in notebooks for years. What's it about? She hesitated. A girl who builds wings out of junkyard scraps and flies away from everything that ever tried to keep her small. He leaned back, watching her. You already sound like her. I haven't flown yet. You will. The words landed softly but with weight, like he meant them more than she could understand. "And you?" she asked, pushing her plate aside. "What don't you usually tell people?" He didn't answer right away. "My father died when I was 22. Left a company he built from nothing. I took it over because I thought I had to. I've been expanding it ever since. But sometimes I wonder if it was ever mine to begin with. Do you even like what you do?" "I'm good at it. That's not the same thing." She studied him, the shadows that moved behind his eyes. "What would you be doing if it weren't for the company?" He looked out over the skyline. "I don't know, that's the part that scares me." Silence settled between them, warm instead of heavy. When she finally stood to leave, he walked her to the elevator. "You didn't try to fix anything," he said as she stepped inside. "Fix what?" "My answers, my regrets. Most people try," she shrugged. "You're not a broken thing." As the doors closed, he held her gaze. "You're going to hear from me again," he said. "I hope so." Back in her apartment, she tried to draw, but every time she put pencil to paper, her mind drifted, not to the penthouse or the food or the car, to the way he'd looked at her when she talked about her dreams, like he actually saw them. The next morning, a knock came at her door. She opened it to find a courier holding a flat package wrapped in brown paper. Inside was a single sheet of high-quality artboard. On it, a note written in elegant handwriting: "For the girl who builds wings. Start drawing." She pressed her fingers to her lips, heart thundering. He wasn't trying to dazzle her, he was trying to understand her, and that was far more dangerous. The sound of high heels echoed across the marble floor as Nicolette stepped into the lobby of the Conrad Hotel, her pulse ticking up with every stride. She hadn't expected the invitation to a black-tie charity gala. But then again, she hadn't expected anything about Quinton Burke. An assistant had called her that morning, not him an assistant. "Mr. Burke would like you to accompany him tonight if you're available." The woman's voice had been clipped, polite, and clearly used to handling things without question. Available. Nicolette had yanked her hair into a bun and stared at her closet like it had personally failed her. By the time the car arrived, a courier had already dropped off a gown floor length. Midnight blue with a dramatic open back and a whisper of silk that made her feel like she'd stepped out of someone else's life. Now, standing in the reception hall surrounded by glittering chandeliers and people who probably had their net worths printed on napkins, she scanned the crowd for a familiar face. And then she saw him. Quinton was standing near a railing, deep in conversation with a senator. His tuxedo was tailored within an inch of its life, but it was the way he carried himself, shoulders squared, jaw set with quiet authority that made her breath catch. He turned, catching sight of her. Whatever he'd been about to say vanished. He moved toward her, slow and deliberate, the crowd parting like they knew better than to stand in his way. "You're here," he said, voice low enough to be just for her. "You sent a dress, a car, and a formal request. I figured I might be in trouble if I declined." His eyes moved over her, not with hunger but with something far more dangerous reverence. "You're stunning. I'm nervous. That makes two of us." She blinked up at him, startled. "You?" "Nervous? I don't usually bring people to these things." She tilted her head. "Why me?" He hesitated. "Because when you walk into a room, I forget the reasons I usually keep people out." Before she could answer, the host announced the start of the auction. Waiters swept through with champagne flutes. A violinist began to play from a corner platform. Quinton offered his arm. "Come, I want to show you something." He led her through a corridor and up a discreet stairwell, bypassing the crowd until they reached a private balcony overlooking the ballroom. Below, the elite of New York murmured and laughed, clinking glasses and raising bidding paddles. "This is why I brought you," he said, gesturing to the space around them. "Not the party, not the performance. Here." She leaned against the railing, watching the crowd without envy. "I don't fit down there," she said quietly. He stepped beside her. "Neither do I," she turned to him. "You don't really believe that. I know it. I was raised to play the game, but I never learned how to enjoy it." She traced the edge of her glass with her finger. "So why keep playing?" He looked out over the crowd. "Because I don't know what it looks like to stop." The admission sat between them, raw and unguarded. She exhaled slowly. "You don't have to prove anything up here." "I'm not trying to." "Then what are you doing?" He met her gaze. Trying to remember who I am when I'm not being what everyone else expects. She let that hang in the air, heavy and honest. Have you ever walked away from something that mattered? She asked. Yes. Once. Why? Because I thought I had more time to fix it. And did you? No, she didn't ask for details. The pain in his voice was enough. I walked away from art school, she said. My dad had a stroke. I came home, got a job, and never went back. Do you regret it? Some days. Other days, I wonder if it was the only thing I could have done right. His hand brushed hers against the railing, not intentional, not overt, but electric. Come with me, he said again, softer this time. They took a service elevator up one more floor to the rooftop, no lights, just the hum of the city below and the stars above. He pulled a small key from his pocket and unlocked a narrow glass door leading to a greenhouse-like structure filled with trailing vines and soft, ambient lights. Inside was a single easel. On it, a canvas blank, next to it, a table with brushes, a jar of water, and a palette of oils. I had this brought up, he said. Thought maybe you could paint something here when it's quiet. Her throat tightened. Why would you do that? Because I want to see what you create when no one's watching. She stood there, hands trembling slightly. I haven't touched oils in years. Then maybe that's exactly why you should. She turned to him, emotions swirling too fast to name. This isn't just about generosity. No, it's not. He stepped closer, close enough for her to feel the heat radiating off his skin. I didn't expect you, he said. I didn't expect to care whether someone saw the real version of me, but you do. And I don't know what to do with that. She pressed a hand to his chest, feeling his heart pulse beneath her fingers. Maybe you don't need to do anything, she said. Maybe you just let it happen. He leaned in, slow enough to give her space to pull away. She didn't. Their lips met soft at first, then deeper, like a question finally answered. When they parted, neither of them said anything. They didn't need to. Below them, the city roared on, but up here it was just them. Two people who weren't supposed to collide, now standing in the quiet aftershock of something they couldn't explain, and neither of them wanted to run. Nicolette stood in the center of the gallery, her hands quietly clasped in front of her, the air humming with murmured conversation and the soft clink of champagne flutes. She was surrounded by strangers dressed in tailored suits and sleek gowns, but her work, the real pieces of her, hung on the walls, illuminated by soft spotlights. It was the first time her art had ever been displayed publicly, and it hadn't happened by chance. Quinton had made it clear he wanted nothing in return, no publicity, no credit, just the opportunity to help her be seen. So when the curator of the Lenox Gallery called her 3 weeks ago, saying her submission had caught the attention of someone deeply invested in emerging talent, she hadn't known what to say. Now, as the crowd moved through the exhibit, stopping to admire the raw, vivid brushwork and the unapologetically emotional panels from her in-progress graphic novel, she felt exposed and exhilarated all at once. A firm hand gently touched the small of her back. You didn't tell me it would look like this, Quinton said in a low voice behind her. I didn't know it would, she replied, barely above a whisper. It feels like someone else painted these. He stepped beside her, his gaze fixed on a piece near the center. That one, he said, it stopped me cold. She followed his eyes to the painting of a girl silhouetted against a fractured cityscape, wings strapped to her back, tattered and patched together with wire and cloth. She wasn't flying. She was standing still, looking up. She's waiting for the right moment, Nicolette said. She looks like she's already decided. She hasn't, Nicolette said quietly, but she wants to. He turned toward her, expression unreadable. When was the last time you did something just because it terrified you? She hesitated. Tonight, I've been thinking, he said, stepping closer, about what I want, not what I'm supposed to want, what I actually want. And I want you. She didn't answer right away, her breath catching somewhere between disbelief and hope. You barely know me, she said finally. I know enough, he said simply. I know that when I'm with you, I'm not performing. I don't have to measure my words. You don't expect anything from me except the truth, and I'm tired of living without that. She looked down at the polished floor, the reflection of the lights shimmering in her heels. I'm not built for your world, then I'll come to yours. She glanced up sharply. Quinton, I don't care about appearances, I care about what feels real, and this, he gestured between them, does. Someone called her name from across the room, a collector who wanted to meet the artist, but she didn't move. I don't know how to do this, she said. Neither do I, he replied. But I'm willing to figure it out if you are. Before she could respond, a woman approached them. Elegant, with silver streaks in her dark hair and a commanding presence that made the air stiffen. Mr. Burke, she said, I didn't expect to see you here. Quinton turned slowly. Good evening, Cassandra. Nicolette stood straighter, unsure whether to step back or stay rooted. You must be the artist, the woman said, turning to her with a cool smile. Impressive work, very unfiltered. Thank you, Nicolette said cautiously. Cassandra turned back to Quinton. Your board meeting is in 8 days. The vote will be close. I hope you're not losing focus. I've never been clearer, he said, his voice calm but firm. Cassandra's eyes flicked between them. I see. After she walked away, Nicolette exhaled. Friend of yours? She's on the board of my company. She thinks I'm making poor decisions lately. Because of me? No, he said, then paused. Because I'm finally making them for myself. Later that night, after the gallery emptied and the lights dimmed, Quinton walked her home. They didn't talk much. The silence between them had shifted, less uncertain now, more assured, like a bridge they'd already begun to cross. When they reached her building, she stopped beneath the awning and turned to him. I'm not sure where this goes, she said. I'm not asking you to know. I'm asking you to be patient with me. He met her gaze. I can do that. She hesitated, then leaned in and kissed him, not tentative, not questioning. Certain. Inside her apartment, she sat on the edge of her bed, still in her dress, staring at the blank space on her wall where she used to tape up unfinished sketches. She stood, walked to her desk, and pulled out a fresh sheet of paper. She began to draw. 3 weeks later, Quinton stood at the front of a crowded boardroom, delivering the final decision of his tenure. I'm stepping down, he said, his voice steady. Effective immediately. A wave of murmurs rippled through the room. He didn't flinch. I built something that no longer reflects the man I want to be. I'm choosing a different path. One that doesn't involve quarterly projections or mergers. One that involves meaning. Later that night, he showed up at Nicolette's door. No suit, no driver, just him. She opened it, surprised. You're early. I thought we were meeting at. He pulled something from behind his back, a key. To a studio, he said. Not mine, yours. Her eyes widened. What? I found a space, lots of light, high ceilings. It's already yours. 1 year paid in full, no strings. Just paint. She stared at him, speechless. I didn't do this to win you, he said. I did it because you're meant to be seen, because the world needs what you have, and I want to be someone who helps you give it. She stepped forward slowly and took the key from his hand. I love you, she said, his breath caught, but he didn't hesitate. I love you back. They didn't need a rooftop or a gala or a skyline to make it real. They just needed this two people who weren't supposed to find each other, choosing to stay anyway. And they did. The first time Nicolette unlocked the door to her new studio, the smell of fresh paint and pinewood floors hit her like a promise. Morning light spilled through the tall industrial windows, casting golden patterns across clean white walls waiting to be filled. She stepped inside, the keys still warm in her palm, her heart thrumming with disbelief so fierce it made her throat ache. Quinton stood behind her, silent, watching her take it all in. Do you want to be alone with it for a minute? He asked. She turned to him. No. I want you here. She walked the length of the space, letting her fingers trail across the edge of the built-in table. Someone had already installed a wide, sturdy slab framed in brushed steel, perfect for messy palettes and ink-stained pages. There was a corner with a couch, a bookshelf, a coffee maker, thoughtful, quietly complete. This is more than a studio, she said. This is a beginning. I thought you might need one, he said. And you shouldn't have to wait for it. Nicolette reached into her tote and pulled out the dog-eared notebook she'd been carrying around for years. She flipped to a page she'd drawn long ago, a rough panel of her winged girl leaping off a rooftop, arms wide, hair streaming behind her. I know how it ends now, she said, holding it up. Quinton stepped closer. Tell me. She doesn't fall, she whispered. She flies. He didn't say anything for a long moment, just looked at her like she was something rare and irreplaceable. "Good," he finally said. "Because I'm not planning to let you crash." She set the notebook down and turned to face him fully. "You walked away from everything you built. For what?" "For the chance to build something that actually matters," he said. "Something that doesn't disappear when the markets shift." "And what does that look like?" He reached out and took her hand. A life where I don't have to wonder if I'm living for someone else's idea of success." She laced her fingers with his. "Then we're both starting over." They spent the next few weeks finding a rhythm that felt nothing like compromise. He moved more slowly now, no longer answering to boardrooms or quarterly earnings. He bought a camera and started documenting her process, not for display, but because he liked watching her build something from nothing. She spent her days drawing in the studio, sometimes barefoot, sometimes dancing between sketches as music played from an old speaker he'd found in storage. She stopped worrying about approval. Her work sharpened. Her lines grew bolder. One afternoon, she looked up from her desk and found him on the floor, surrounded by newspapers and a crooked stack of books. "What are you doing?" she asked, amused. "Trying to teach myself how to cook without setting off the fire alarm," he said, flipping a page. "I figured we should stop living on takeout." She leaned back in her chair, smiling. "You're terrible in the kitchen. I'm aware. But I'm willing to improve. You don't have to prove anything." "I know," he said, "but I want to do things that make our life feel like ours, not borrowed or temporary." She stood and walked over to him, barefoot on the cool wood, and sat beside him. "You already do," she said. "Every time you show up, it feels like we're doing this together." He looked at her, eyes soft. "I never thought I'd find a version of life that didn't feel like holding my breath. I never thought I'd find someone who'd hold the door open long enough for me to walk through." "Then let's keep the door open," he said. "Wide enough for whatever comes next." They didn't need declarations anymore. They were already living inside one. 6 months later, her graphic novel launched to critical acclaim and immediate demand for more. Her name was whispered in circles she'd never imagined entering, and her inbox overflowed with offers. But she didn't move. She stayed in the studio where she could hear the rain on the windows and smell coffee brewing down the hall. Quinton opened a small creative consultancy, just a few hand-picked clients, a flexible schedule, and no suits. He wore worn-in shirts and smiled more than he ever had. He built the life he'd once thought impossible, not around power, but around peace. They kept their Sunday mornings sacred: pancakes, jazz, and nowhere to be. One rainy afternoon, she found him standing in the doorway of the studio, holding something behind his back. "I was thinking," he said, "we should mark the start of year 1 properly." She raised a brow. "You already gave me everything?" "Not quite." He pulled a small box from behind him. Inside was a silver ring, simple, elegant, a soft curve in the band that reminded her of the way he touched her when he thought she was asleep. "I don't need a ceremony or a crowd," he said. "I just need you. Every day in this life we made." She didn't cry. She laughed, bright, breathless, full. "Then say it, Quinton." "I want to marry you," he said. "Not because I need to make something official, but because I've never been more certain of anything in my life." She took the ring, slid it on herself, and kissed him before he could say another word. They celebrated that night with homemade pasta and terrible wine, and when the power flickered out mid-storm, they lit candles and danced barefoot in the studio, the city glowing around them. They never needed a grand finale. They were already living inside their ever after.